Okay, sorry about the delay. StreamYard was not trying to see your boy and shine, but regardless, here we are on this Monday morning after an incredible weekend of college football, and there is plenty for us to dive into. We've got to talk about what's happening out west with USC and the Trojans. That is something that I find fascinating. We need to talk about what happened in that game because I think there's some things we need to unpack. Furthermore, we need to talk about Oklahoma's close game with UCF, a team that's very well coached in Gus Malzahn, but I think there's a deeper conversation we can have about this game. Texas sustains a massive injury. That's going to be something we need to talk about, what that means for their season going forward. Of course, with it being Monday, we have our dunce of the week. We have our game of the week. We have to talk about Alabama, Tennessee. But with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. And I think one of the things I'd like to do is start with the game of the week because this is kind of an obscure game. This is a game that I don't think a lot of people are going to have on their radar whenever they're thinking about what game of the week could be. And to me, it's Minnesota, Iowa. And understand, let me lay the foundation for you so that you can understand why I view this as the game of the week. First and foremost, I picked it on our Bleacher Report Pick'em show. I picked Minnesota to beat Iowa, but Minnesota has not beat Iowa in Iowa since 1999. Furthermore, this rivalry over the past few seasons has been largely one-sided, in which Iowa has absolutely dominated it. And when we actually get into the nitty-gritty of the games, the past few have been very close games, decided by a very thin margin. I woke up this past week, and I don't know what was inside of me that called me to say that Minnesota was going to win this game, but I just had a feeling that for the first time since 1999, Minnesota was going to be able to go to Iowa and pull out a massive win, and that's exactly what they did. So game of the week, in my opinion, it has got to be Minnesota downing their rival Iowa in Iowa for the first time since 1999. That is wild to see. As we already have a bunch of people in here, let's go ahead and hit some comments. We have Mars in here. Mars, as always, my man, thank you for joining in. Chris, happy you're in here, man. Y'all go ahead and hit that like button. Cam, as always, man, glad to see you in here. Carson, thoughts on OU struggles against UCF? We'll talk about that, man. I talked about last week that I thought OU would win, and I thought they would win more handily than they did. But the one area I was like, yo, this aspect of UCF is really good is their rushing attack. They have a really deep rushing attack. It's not just coming from one different guy. And Gus Malzahn is a really smart offensive mind. He has a tricky type offense that if you don't see it, if you're not accustomed to it, it can take advantage of you. And I think that's part of what we saw against Oklahoma is that they just ran into an offensive scheme that Gus is really good at. You don't see a whole lot. I think OU probably got punched in the jaw a little bit, but we're going to dive into that game bigger because I think that the more impressive thing is the way that OU responded and how they won that game, that last stand to keep the game in the Sooners' hands. That, to me, in my opinion, was very impressive, especially with how that game had gone, especially with how the Sooners' season has gone. Understand, you were riding a high. Everything had come so easy outside that Texas game, but every game that the Sooners felt like when they were going into it, yes, as an opponent we should beat. Yes, this is an opponent we need to respect. They were kicking their teeth in. So for the first time, you played an opponent that you should have beat that actually put up a fight. And I think that your team, there is a response period during that, right? This is one of the things we talked about that OU just hadn't, up until Texas, hadn't ever had that moment where it was like, oh, we're in a football game this season. Now, they had that against Texas, but I think it's one thing to have that against your bitter rival, Texas, who is a top 5 team in the nation, and I still believe is a top 10 team in the nation. It's one thing to have that against that team. It's another thing to get punched in the jaw early against a UCF. I think that was the first time all season OU had that feeling of like, oh man, what happens now? But the way they responded, in my opinion, shows the growth from last season to this season. Now, people can say, oh, but it was UCF. Yeah, Washington struggled with who this past weekend? I mean, Alabama struggled with USF. We've seen struggle wins all year. I'm not moved by a struggle win. I'm moved by how you got the win. And I think there's a lot of conversations to be had there. Because even in a room full of dimes, Iowa can't score. No, that's pretty bad. Boo-hoo, Swiss cheese defense beat by a walk-on home. Well, Sean, I don't know how much, don't get me wrong, the defense plays a part, but for the second straight week, we have another conversation to talk about. It's been pretty fun watching USC fans finally realize it's not just Alex Grinch that's the problem. There's fundamental issues from the top down, no culture, no toughness. True. UCF front seven is tough. It's good. It's there. Could the fact that Lincoln Riley never actually played college football? No, I don't think so. I think it would certainly help Rob, but I think we've also seen coaches be able to not play at a super high level and then translate into success. But I do think it is a part of it. I think that you're absolutely on to something. I just think that it's not an impossibility, right? Like Bill Belichick, for instance. I just think that's a Lincoln thing. Good point. I think DG and Lubby being with people in the UCF locker room holds a little weight. Yeah. He played in the bench at Texas Tech. Leach had to convince him to hang up his cleats and learn how to coach. UCF has some great. It's a great program, man. Like it really is. I had a national moot court tournament my junior or senior year of college. No, it was my junior year. My junior year nationals for moot court was at UCF's campus. I met a lot of great people. I actually have some friends that were at UCF at the time. I had a great time. Administration was unbelievably friendly. The student body there was really friendly. Never got to go to a game. But I would love to. 2 missed field goals. Yeah, the field goals OU special teams is that's the one area I can say OU's offense is really, really, really good. OU's defense, it's unbelievable the turnaround they've had. There's one area of OU that just hasn't been at the same level as everything else, and it's their special teams. That running back, yeah, man. Cam, and it's not just one, brother. It's not just one. They've got like 3 or 4. And that was what I was talking about before this game, where I was like, hey, OU's going to roll them, but like they have 3 or 4 different running backs that they're going to rely on, which gives them a really deep, thorough running game. And you have Gus Malzahn calling the shots. And when you give Gus a really deep, thorough running game, he's going to give you results. Now, Gus is a little bit like Lane Kiffin in the sense of their wild cards. So you don't know how long it's going to sustain. It could be a whole game. It could be a quarter. It could be a half. You just don't really know. But that's neither here nor there. Let's move to USC. We'll talk a little bit more about OU later on. We pretty much will hit a lot of it, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. USC in trouble. So after this USC game, we're in our group chat, and we have a little bit of a debate going as to where the blame lies in this game. This USC-Utah game. Because for the second straight week in a row, I'm looking at a situation where Caleb did not play well. It didn't play well. Let me pull up the game. For whatever reason, they're trying to pretend like it never happened. There we go. So Caleb went for 256 yards, 34 of 24, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But do you want to know the thing that I noticed? Time and time again, Caleb would hold on to the ball for so long. And as I was doing my rewatch, it's almost like a little light bulb went off in my head. And one of the things that I realized is that this past 2 weeks, we've seen hero ball from Caleb Williams. And this past 2 weeks, we've seen 2 losses for USC. It's because hero ball is usually preceded by desperation. And let me explain this for a second. I'm not saying Caleb Williams is actively desperate. My point is, whether consciously or subconsciously, Caleb Williams acknowledges the fact that he is one of the few major quarterbacks in the nation that plays for one of the few major teams that if he does not go take the win, there will not be a win to be had. Desperation leads to hero ball. When you feel like you're cornered and you have no other outs, you start doing some different things. One of those different things I saw against Utah was Caleb was trying to do everything he could to make a play happen. Sometimes that can come as the detriment of your offense. Sometimes that can come at the detriment of your offense. Now, understand, I don't blame Caleb for the loss. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I think that the fact that you haven't had a defense for 2 years, really, Lincoln hasn't had a defense since he's had Caleb. I think that leads to an acknowledgement by Caleb that I have got to go win this game. I'm going to give you another game to juxtapose. Alabama, Tennessee, ranked game. Both teams ranked. Tennessee has one of the best defensive fronts in college football. Hell, Pierce Jr., I think, is the highest graded pass rusher in the nation. Tennessee has the most sacks in college football. And what they're doing to get to the passer, the quarterback is unbelievable at Tennessee. Do you want to know why you didn't see a desperate Alabama? Because Jalen Milroe, because the coaching staff knew if the offense sputters, we can lean on the defense. Now, we can't lean on the defense for 4 quarters, but for a quarter, for 2 quarters, we can give you that grace period to figure it out. Now, I'm not arguing that's the operative way to play college football. The operative way to play college football would be to show up with your lunch pail ready to go and play 4 quarters of football offensively, defensively, and special teams. But there is a massive difference whenever you are afforded the luxury of saying, I can sputter in the first quarter. As long as I'm not making killer mistakes, as long as I'm not turning the ball over, my defense has me. Caleb doesn't have that luxury. Caleb has never had that luxury. And Caleb is one of the most spectacular talents I've gotten the pleasure of watching at the quarterback position. And I truly believe that. And we, during my lifetime, have been blessed with some truly next level quarterback play. And I would argue I put Caleb among the top of them. He's that good. But there is a problem that we have talked about on this channel since last season that is still the way to beat this USC offense. It has not changed. And this falls on both Lincoln Riley, primarily Lincoln Riley, and Caleb. Run 2 high safeties. If you can mitigate the USC rush attack so that you don't have to drop a safety in the box, and if you can play contain on Caleb Williams, typically requiring you to have an athletic linebacker, keep 2 safeties over top. And that has consistently shown to be the thing that at the very least makes this USC offense take a second thought. So who do we blame? Who do we blame in this game? I think there's plenty of blame to go around. You have to put some level of blame on Lincoln Riley. Because you just got beat by Utah, who doesn't have Cam Rising. They don't have Kuth. I apologize to any Utah fans. I've watched the games and I've seen his name pronounced 2 different ways. I think it's Kuth. But the young man is going to be a problem whenever he gets healthy. Point being, they don't have 2 of the players that would take this Utah team as we currently know it and absolutely take them to a different level. That tight end that we are not getting to watch this year, I want to paint the picture here. Utah just sent a tight end, one of the top tight ends drafted last year, Dalton Kincaid. This cat they brought back this year, they felt like was just as good, if not had the opportunity to be better. So we're talking about one of college football's best players not playing, and then one of the more veteran quarterbacks, Cam Rising, not playing, and you can't beat that. I know other teams have lost to Utah. Yes, Florida lost to Utah. Florida lost to Utah at the first few weeks of the season. We always talk about this. If you're going to lose early, because then every fan in the nation, even if you don't like Florida, you are forced to concede the very real point of They lost whenever every team in the nation was still trying to figure out who we are. If you're going to lose early. Because then you've got a legitimate argument. We were trying to figure ourselves out. We stumbled. That's it. We stumbled. That's it. USC has now lost twice. Late. Back to back. So Lincoln Riley shoulders a lot of this blame for maintaining the status quo, which is just incredible. Right? Lincoln Riley expected different results by changing nothing. By changing nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, if that's how the world worked, do you know how many people would be losing weight left, right, and center and still lining up at McDonald's? Because you could eat all the McDoubles you wanted and it wouldn't matter. You'd lose weight. You would get the desired effect you wanted while changing nothing. Somehow, to Lincoln Riley, that is a viable option. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley's a dumb man. I think Lincoln Riley's a brilliant man. I think you only get this far in your career by being brilliant. Let's understand that. Whether you like him or you don't like him, you only get so far into this field by being good. But that doesn't make a lick of sense to me. And maybe I don't get it. Maybe someone could come on here. Maybe a former player could come on here and say, but Ty, this is what you're not looking at. This, and this. And maybe I'm missing it. But damn it, I've given it a lot of thought. I'm the type that when I can't figure something out, it bothers me a little bit. And so I'll stay up all night. I won't sleep. I'm 28 years old and going gray because shit like that will stress me out. It has no effect on my life, but it stresses me out because I can't get to the bottom of it. I have no idea. No idea. But this notion of I am going to do the same thing I did yesterday, but I am going to expect different results, it's nonsensical. And it's got to stop. And quite frankly, I don't know how much better it gets in the Big Ten. Because I like Malachi Nelson, ladies and gentlemen. I like Miller Moss. How many Caleb Williams just grow on trees? Lincoln has now had access. Understand this. Lincoln has now had access to some of the freakiest quarterbacks and has not been able to win a playoff game. Meanwhile, Nick Saban won a national championship with Jake Coker. All respect to Jake Coker. He was fantastic that season. That is in no way or shape or form a slight to Jake Coker. He was great that season. I mean, truly, if you don't remember that Jake Coker Alabama national championship, he got pulled early in the season. He came back and willed his team to victory and also showed everybody that I will be unmistakable. I will be undeniable. There was a game where Alabama was having a close game and Jake Coker, nothing was opening up downfield. He tucked it and started running. He wasn't running to run out of bounds. He was lowering his shoulder and trying to run through linebackers, and he won over the entire team. Point being, with all due respect to Jake Coker is not Caleb Williams. Jake Coker is not Kyler Murray. Saban got a ring with him. I know he had Derrick Henry. I understand that. You had two of the freakiest quarterbacks we've ever seen. Freakier than a frog with a mustache. I mean, these dudes can go out and win football games out of nothing. Kyler and Caleb are cheat codes. But Lincoln Riley operates under the assumption that he can get drastically different results by changing absolutely nothing. And that type of logic falls short on me. So when we're rounding out how we assess blame in this game, some of it's got to go to Lincoln. The majority of it's got to go to Lincoln. A lot of it has got to go to Alex Grinch. And some of it's got to go to Caleb. I'm not forgetting Baker, Cam. Baker is one of the most accomplished quarterbacks But if we're talking about natural ability, right? And I think you get what I'm trying to say. If we're talking natural ability, Baker willed his way to greatness, and he was already so talented. He had a lot of talent, but his attitude, his moxie, his want to was legendary. Legendary. If you gave every athlete in the world Baker's want to, oh, my word. My word. Kyler, you beat me to it, Cam. Literally, as it was about to. Kyler and Cam were born where the Allen practice. We're talking practice. Like, that's the type of talent they have. When I watch Kyler and Caleb, I think of that Allen Iverson up in front of the media chastising them because you're talking to me. I'm Allen Iverson. You're talking to me about practice. It's that same type of talent level that they have. And the worst news of it all, and this is where I'll hit some comments after this. The worst news of it all, if you're a USC fan, your schedule doesn't get any easier. It does not get any easier. In fact, I would contend it is about to get brutal. You took Notre Dame, had that game. That's a tough one. Utah, once again, tough opponent. You get Cal. Next. Then you have Washington at Oregon, UCLA. Now, UCLA, their quarterback situation is up in the air. That defense isn't up in the air. That defense is legit. They got corners. They got an edge. They are well coached. And I'm going to be very honest. If USC trots out there like they have this past 2 weeks, Washington and Oregon are going to be a problem because both Washington and Oregon play defense and they can score at will. Let's hit some comments because this is going to be fascinating. This is a fair point, Day. This is a fair point. I mean, that's a fact. That's a fact. I have nothing to counter that with. Here in a little bit, I'm going to star this. Actually, I have it pulled up right now. I have the numbers on this actually. Yeah. No, look, you're right. You're right. Here we go. So Caleb Williams against non-top 25 defenses or opponents. Yeah, total defenses against non-top 25 total defenses. He's had 23 games. His completion percentage is a 70%. He's averaging 317 yards a game, 78 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. He's had 5 games where he has played a top 25 defense. In those 5 games, he averages 51.4%. 172 yards a game, 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, which is exactly why I said earlier, there is no universe where I can absolve blame from Caleb. I watched him against Utah hold the ball and try and do a spin cycle and then just throw it out of bounds. And I'm like, you're asking for awful things to happen. And I don't know why. You are so gifted, man. And I think a lot of that isn't necessarily on Caleb. Like I said to begin this, I think a lot of that is an acknowledgement, whether consciously or subconsciously, that Caleb has where he's like, I got to do everything to win. So if I don't make this play, we're not winning the game, which is why if I'm ascribing blame, Caleb is the least of blame, because as Lincoln, you're supposed to be there for him. That's your job to look after Caleb. That's your job. And it's not being done. So, Chris, if you're in here still, I agree with you here. I ascribe far more blame to Lincoln. No doubt. No doubt about it. Had a donation, Stink-Ass Cat. Thank you so much for the $20. He says, I think Cal will beat them by applying the pressure on Williams. Hey, Cal is a sneaky team. He's 70% completion percent. Stink, you are a beautiful soul. I didn't need to go find it. I just needed to go find you. This is a beautiful place, ladies and gentlemen. He typed this comment like at 10:25. He typed this comment 9 minutes ago. That's how ahead of me Stink is. Stink, as always, my man. Thank you for the 20. Thank you for the comment. You're 100% right. You're 100% right. 100%. Utah is what ISU and KSU were. That's interesting. I think that is interesting. That's good. I might put them a little bit above, but understand I'm very biased towards Utah, right, Cam? Like, and I think you and I have actually had this conversation before in one of the group chats we were on, I think actually a year ago, where I was telling you how I really like Kyle Whittingham as a coach. I'm a big fan. And so because of that, I probably am a little biased, but I think you're really on to something there. That's a really cool comparison. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Best coaches know when and how to adapt. Yeah, no doubt. The man, the myth, the legend, guys. If you're not tapped in to this man right here that I'm about to highlight his comment, I don't know what you're doing in the college football world. Hayes Fawcett here in the building with us. He says, "What's up, Ty? Everyone make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. 100 away from 20K. We are right around the corner, man. Thank you so much for being in here, Hayes. It is always surreal to see you in these live streams, just because I have had your notifications turned on for years now. So it's always just unbelievable. What's your thoughts about the tweet that Emmanuel Acho put out after USC lost, talking about Caleb should consider sitting out the rest of the year? So I want to be as fair as possible to Emmanuel Acho. Like, I want to be as fair as possible to him. And I'm going to operate under the assumption that he is just a really caring soul that cares about the well-being of Caleb Williams. But here's the issue with that, Hayes. If you're that caring, why the hell are you watching football in the first place? If you care that much, why are you watching this in the first place? Because that same argument you could use for Caleb, you could use for every player in the nation. Now, I understand he says it's fiscally irresponsible for Caleb to take the field, but ladies and gentlemen, we know football is a violent game. What if a kid isn't going to make the NFL and gets hurt going out there? Is that injury any less tragic? Like, is that the argumentation that we are going to go off of, that one child's injury means less than another because of the future they have at their feet? Like, I understand one future is much more lucrative. I understand if you're that individual, you would want to protect and foster that future, and that's acceptable. But this notion of like, you should just sit out. I'm going to operate under the assumption, Hayes, that he's just really looking out for Caleb and he didn't fully think of what he had said. And it was just one of those things where he sees Caleb trying to win games for his team. He sees Caleb trying to do all of this stuff. And he's like, I'm worried about the young man. He lays it all out there. And one of these times it might not. I'm operating under the assumption that it is coming from that place, because it gets into a real slippery slope. And this is one of the things I always loved about debate. Whenever I would hear something, when I'd be in my debate rooms, whether in high school or in college, whenever I did debate, and I would hear an argument like that, the first thing I would write down on my notepad is a slippery slope. Because where do we draw the line? Do we only care if you're a top 5 draft pick? Is that where we start caring about your health playing the rest of the season? Is that when we start saying, you don't need to play anymore? But what about number 6? What about number 7? What about and that's a really dumb argument I just made. But understand, I made that argument and presented it to you to show this notion that the slippery slope is that large. Like, where do we draw the line? And furthermore, you want to be a leader of a team. Right now, USC needs a leader. Right now, USC needs a leader. And I contend Caleb can help his draft stock. I mean, let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, he's not going to be able to help his draft stock too much more than it already is. You don't go higher than 1. But he can solidify it without putting up Heisman numbers. Do you want to know how? What's the one thing, and I really want to hear from Chad on this, what's the one thing you see from USC that looks like it's lacking right now? They need someone to step up. And guess who that is? It's Caleb. Caleb is begging for anybody else outside of him to step up. Whether that's Lincoln, whether that's Grinch, whoever. Caleb is begging for anybody outside of himself to step up. If Caleb sits out, their leadership is gone. I think if I'm a GM, just seeing Caleb go out there and continue balling, continue playing for the love of the game, that means something to me because that shows you're a leader. You're a leader of men. That when shit got hard, you didn't tuck tail and run. You were a leader of men. And let's understand this, guys. Caleb has not floated, to my knowledge, has not floated that he's even considering this. This is an Acho tweet. I'm operating under the assumption that Acho is just looking out for Caleb. I understand what Acho is talking about. Like, I do get it because the first thing that comes into my mind is that Jalen Smith injury, where the kid is about to be a first-round draft pick, goes out there to play that bowl game for Notre Dame and tears his knee to hell. And they didn't know if he'd be able to run again. I mean, he might have lost millions overnight. So I get what Acho is talking about, but the problem is that argument could be levied against any player that puts on a jersey that night. Football's a dangerous game. It's a beautiful game. It's my favorite sport in the world, but it is a violent, dangerous game. So like that argument applies to everyone. I think it's how you push through that is far more defining than how you tap out. And I don't think Caleb's going to tap out. No, I love that question, Hayes, because I'd gotten so into all the other wildness of college football this weekend that I'd completely forgotten about that. Let me find this, Anthony. I've seen your comments, man. I've just been in my own little world. He says, Ty, can you explain to me why it's National Media College Football is not giving Miami credit for this win against Clemson? They're saying that Clemson was down. Miami should have won. No, Miami gets credit for beating Clemson. Look, two things can be true at once, Anthony. Clemson is down compared to the Clemson of 2015 and after, but that doesn't mean Clemson is a terrible football team. They recruit well. They're well coached. I mean, you still got to go beat them. So no, look, Miami is in a position where any wins they can get, they're building wins. That's how you build foundations. Foundations are how you build houses. You don't build a house on nothing. That's any win you can get. You stack them. You stack them. Love it. The issue with Lincoln Riley, he has the ego where he has to be the smartest guy in the room and think he's like Coach and Mike McDaniel. Yeah, see, I can't really speak to that because I've never been around him. I've never spoke with the man, so I can't speak to that. I can just speak to like what I've seen on a football field. Clemson still, yeah, they still got a lot of talent, Mars. That's exactly how I view this. So I still think that the Miami win is good. And Reuben Bain, my goodness gracious, ladies and gentlemen, we just had a coming out party this weekend. Reuben Bain. Wow. Unbelievable. Injured players have an education to fall back on. For sure, Michael. For sure. And that's the beautiful thing, right? No doubt. Don't see Caleb. I don't either. Yes, if you wouldn't mind, guys, please subscribe. And as we're here, a special thank you to Shady Mile. I had some friends and family come in this weekend after Saturday morning. Had to go do some stuff, and we got to watch all of the college football action, watch the UFC action, because y'all already know, as obsessed I am with college football, I have that same sort of obsession towards MMA, kickboxing, UFC. So got to sit back with a bunch of good friends, watch the games, and enjoy some Shady Mile. As you can see, the Shady Mile rye was a very popular feature this weekend, but so too was the Shady Mile wheat. And the best thing about Shady Mile, the thing that really stood out to me about them, which is why I wanted to take the sponsorship opportunity, is the fact that they're one of the oldest distilleries in Kentucky, but they keep you, the consumer, at the forefront of their mind, because they're offering you a valuable product, a good product, a great value. And that to me means the most, right? They're trying to give people a great product at a great value. And anytime someone has the consumers at the forefront of their mind, I think that's the best business practices. I think consumer happiness should always trump profits, because if you have consumer happiness, profits will follow. And I think that's kind of the route Shady Mile has taken. So a special thank you to Shady Mile. If you go on their website, link in the description, and link in this little scroller that has been going the entire time. You can go get 2 bottles for a great price, and they send you a shirt. Ease, Legion. That's the beautiful thing about rivalries, Legion. Don't get me wrong. It's just that's the beautiful thing about rivalries, Legion. Beautiful thing about rivalries. Now let's move forward because I quickly want to talk about this right here. We need to talk about Texas. Texas had a bit of a close call with Houston, and they won. But Quinn Ewers goes down. And this is so unfortunate to hear, especially after the injury last season. You never want to hear that, especially when the Texas Longhorns had their entire season right in front of them, and they still do. They still do. They're a very talented team. They are a very, very talented team. And I actually think their second string quarterback is about to show college football that he's really damn good in Malik Murphy. Yeah. It you just cannot put into words how much this sucks for Ewers, man. Like, it just, whenever you're in a team like Texas, you are the starting quarterback and you have the opportunity to win out, go to the Big 12 championship, and attempt to avenge your only loss of the season to get to the college football playoffs. I mean, you can't ask for anything more as a college football player. And to have that taken from you is just super unfortunate. Hoping for a speedy recovery. The kid is unbelievably talented. I have referenced, he has a throw this year. He has a throw this year that I have referenced several times because it's one of the most beautiful touchdown passes of the entire year thus far. And it was the moon shot to Xavier Worthy. Come on. Come on. The more and more I rewatch that pass, the more and more I turn into the mindset of I don't care what type of position the defensive back would have been in. That was a touchdown. That was a touchdown. That moon shot, it came in right over his shoulder. It was beautiful. A beautiful pass. I've actually showed my wife about 18 times, unfortunately. Hey, man, you got Holgerson is a character, man. Holgerson is a character. But what does this mean for Texas, right? Really unfortunate for Quinn Ewers. We're hoping for a speedy recovery. Thoughts and prayers with the Ewers family. I know that once he gets back to business, he's going to put college football right back on notice. He is very talented, and I'm hoping he hits the ground running when he comes back. But what does this mean for Texas? Well, it means, one, you're going to rely on your run game. Luckily for you, you have Jonathan Brooks, you have Baxter, and you have a few guys that we haven't gotten to see a ton just yet that I think are going to be very good. So the Texas running game, they're going to lean on that. Two, you're now going to see Malik Murphy. And Malik Murphy is an interesting quarterback, a very interesting quarterback, because coming out, I remember talking to people around Texas, and they were so excited because they felt like there wasn't a quarterback that was working as hard out there. Or if there was, they didn't feel like Malik Murphy was ever getting outworked. I remember talking to Texas fans that were in the know, and they were saying the young man's dedication to improve is palpable. And you could see it. Whenever he played in that spring game, he was automatic. So Texas going forward, this is going to be interesting because they have a very capable quarterback. Malik Murphy has got a huge arm. He can stretch the field. He's going to have no issue doing that. Sark isn't going to have to go completely out of his comfortable playbook because Murphy has abilities to do all that stuff. Texas's offense, I'm really excited to see, actually. I'm really excited to see what they do with Malik Murphy because he's a really talented player. I'm excited to see how Sark kind of goes back to the drawing board and reformulates pass here. I'm hoping Ewers gets healthy quick, but Murphy deserves the opportunity to run the offense without restriction. Let's see if he's got it or not. 100% agree, Ram. Could not agree more. Could not agree more at all with this sentiment. I think you hit the nail on the head. He needs to be given the offense that he is comfortable with, because I don't know if Sark has different little wrinkles that he'll use with Murphy because maybe Murphy is great at this sort of read. And so they sprinkle. Point being, he needs to go out there with a healthy playbook behind him to do what he needs to do because he's got the ability to. I believe he does, Ran. I believe he does. I really like Savion Red too, though, Shadow. I was talking to Homer about this after the Texas spring game. That Savion Red stuck out like a sore thumb. My God. I mean, I was watching that Texas spring game even again in like August, and Red was just impossible not to notice. Impossible not to notice. Was Texas last year doing anything before coming? Cowboy, could you rephrase this? I'm on brain burn right now, and you've probably asked me an incredibly straightforward question, but my mind is mush at this point. So if you could rephrase that, I'd love to dive into that. Texas has some elite QBs in that room and a nice one coming in 2025. Very true. Very true. Really like that. Yeah. Yeah. From Alabama. Yeah. Kid's very talented. Murphy is a pocket passer, not a runner. If he has to, he's not a runner like Ewers, Gary Hamilton reiterated. Was Texas becoming? If you could retype that whole thing, Cowboy, was Texas, because I'm just on very low sleep. Murphy, yeah, look, I don't know that Murphy's a runner, but my God, does he have a cannon attached to his body? My God, does he have a cannon attached to his body? We're about to dive into Alabama, Tennessee. Great game. Great game. Another rivalry game. And Cowboy, whenever you have that question, I'll dive right into that. We're gonna start down this path right here. You get on that horse, you got to ride it. So Alabama versus Tennessee, and once again for Alabama, the tale of two halves, and it's becoming frustrating. Now, understand that the frustrating part is watching Alabama not play up to the level that we have seen them be capable of. That's the frustrating part. I said before that game that Alabama has a very clear risk on their schedule. When I look at Alabama's schedule, there's one team in particular that I think could derail Alabama's season. And unfortunately, it's not one of the teams that you will actually physically see on the Alabama Crimson Tide schedule. No, to find the team that for me as an Alabama fan scares me the most, as an Alabama fan, you need to look at the top of that schedule. Look right above week 1 to where you find whose schedule you're looking at. Alabama scares me. That's the team that scares me the most. With due respect to LSU, I think they have a top 10 offense in the nation. PG says Auburn. With respect to Auburn, PG, we play in Jordan Hare. Jordan Hare's a really tough place to play. And Hugh Freeze is a really brilliant offensive coach. He has had Nick Saban's number in the past, either beating him or giving good games. So with respect to Auburn as well, I'm watching Alabama body Tennessee off of a half of work, where they're coming back in the game, nulling Tennessee. Tennessee, you're just not going to score anymore, and we're going to drag you up and down this football field. I saw the same thing against Ole Miss. It's like we're going to come out, and then we're just going to click, and then we're just going to start dragging you up and down the football field. I saw the same thing in the first half against Auburn. Or not Auburn, Arkansas. I apologize. Where Milroe was hitting deep shots at will, and then the second half came, and it was like they kind of fell asleep a little bit. We have yet to see Alabama play 4 full quarters of football. The problem, I contend, we haven't seen Alabama play 4 full quarters of football since the 2021 SEC championship game against Georgia, where they ran Georgia out the building. That was the last time I feel like I saw Alabama play 4 quarters of football. So this is a double-edged sword. Whenever you're talking about Alabama, you have got to have this nuance, this understanding that the Crimson Tide are a little bit of a double-edged sword. because they have been inconsistent. But when they get it together, this team is really hard to stop. Now, Rand, you ask a great question. Do you feel like Milroe is growing, or is the defense just winning games for you guys? I think it's both, Ram. I think that the defense is allowing the offense to sputter. We talked about this with USC earlier. Actually, I drove Ran, it's so funny you say this comment. I actually love that you say this comment because right to begin this stream, when I think we only had 10 people in here, I compared the USC situation with Alabama. And I was like, Caleb Williams, whether subconsciously or consciously, understands that if Caleb Williams, doesn't go take that win, it's not happening, right? He can't rely on his defense. He can't rely on it. So at some level, I think Caleb will sometimes play desperation football, not even meaning to, because he knows if I don't get this done, it's not getting done. If I don't go out and do it, it's not happening. Alabama's defense has afforded Alabama the opportunity to start slow, to sputter, to have these moments and learn as they go. So I think the answer is both. I think early on in the season, it was relying on the defense to kind of allow the offense to grow. But now we're seeing the defense still being out. The defense, their defense is great, but the offense is really starting to come together. And in that second half, I think Tommy Rees had his best half as a play caller in an Alabama uniform that second half. The pre-snap motion, the different ways he was getting people the ball, that was the best play calling I've seen out of Tommy Rees. And if you can give me that for a full game, that style of play calling, Bama can be dangerous. Because understand, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just Jalen Milroe growing into this. You have an offensive coordinator that's 31 years old. As I sit here and talk to you, I'm 28. He's 31 years old. He's never worked with a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. He's worked with Ian Book and Tyler Buckner. He's never had a quarterback like Milroe. And he kind of has to learn the Alabama offense. So it's a learning. It's a whole package of learning. But I will say this. The last thing people want is for them to figure it out. Because that's a lot of talent on that team. A lot of talent on that team. So I've heard a lot of talk about this game. I've heard a lot of talk about this Tennessee-Alabama game and how Alabama was gifted by the refs, which, first off, I don't almost ever like those arguments, right? Because it's reductionist. It's not true. The refs didn't beat you by 14 points. You lost by 14 points. You lost by 14 points. Furthermore, there was a moment in this game that we haven't gotten to it yet because I've been waiting. It just so happens that today in this live stream, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get a great example of multitasking, a great example of killing two birds with one stone. Because as we are still talking about the Alabama-Tennessee game, we get to talk about the dunce of the week call. Josh Heupel, after the game, went in front of the press, and when he was asked, what did you think about the officiating, he sat there silent. Didn't say a word. Now, that was a really familiar feeling to me, that silence and like the bewilderment of the silence, because I had that same expression not 2 hours earlier whenever he has a 6'5", 250-pound quarterback. It's 4th and inches, and you line up in the gun. So, Heupel, you, in all of your infinite offensive wisdom, are telling me that the easiest way to get 5 inches is by sitting your quarterback 4 yards behind the line to gain? So now he's got to get 12 feet and 6 inches? Brilliant. Brilliant. Please. More. Brilliant. Blame the refs. No. Blame the refs that you took a 6'5", 250-pound linebacker and put him 12 feet behind the line of scrimmage, and he didn't get the 4th and inches. You went out the gun with a 6'5", 250-pound quarterback in 4th and inches and didn't get it, and you have the gall to talk about the refs. I know why he's talking about the refs, because he's hoping nobody goes back, sees that call, and say that was so incomprehensibly stupid. That was dumb. That made me so mad. I actually sent our group chat the meme of Bernie Sanders sitting there saying, I am once again asking all of you to make it illegal. to go out the gun in a 4th and 1 or 4th and inches. Why? Why? How many times? We just saw Philadelphia do it last night. The brotherly shove, they're calling it. They line Jalen Milroe up, they line Jalen Hurts up right behind the center with 2 big nasties behind him. And when they say hut, they just push forward. You needed 6 inches. All you needed Joe Milton to do was do this. And instead, you line him up in the gun 12 feet or 9 feet, 3 yards, 3 to 4 yards behind where you need to gain. I need somebody, anybody out there to riddle to me why that makes sense. Because that was a huge turning point in this game. If you're asking me the biggest turning point in this game, that. They went for it in their own territory, I believe, in 4th and inches out the gun, where Josh Heupel, offensive guru, said, hey, we need 6 inches. And I think that the smartest way to get 6 inches is to line you back up 12 feet behind that 6 inches and make you run to go get it. I don't understand. And I need somebody to make me understand. That was the turning point in the game. I understand you might have gotten some calls you didn't like, right? And that happens. That's football. But that's not in your control, Coach Heupel. What is in your control is calling a play call that fundamentally took your offense out the game. If anything, I think that somebody should have asked, are you an op? I was surprised nobody from Tennessee straight up asked him, are you on the Bama payroll? Are you an op? You line up your 6'5", 250-pound quarterback who genuinely, guys, all he had to do was this. First down. The ball just has to get over. He says hut. First down. That's it. That's all that had to be done. But we got cute. And you didn't get a first down. You lost the ball in your territory, and that was a turning point in this game to me. You want to talk about the refs? That's not in your control. Be mad about the things you could control, and you failed. It's that simple. You didn't hear me talking about the ghost pass interference call last year when Alabama played Tennessee, and I didn't see Heupel too overtly concerned whenever Alabama had 17 penalties against Tennessee last year. And I'll tell you what they're not telling you. Everybody keeps saying from the Tennessee side, I've seen it from their beat writers, Alabama has so many penalties per game, and look how much more penalized Tennessee was. Tennessee averages more penalties per game than Alabama. That's the part they're not telling you. They're hoping you don't look into that. They don't want you to know that. Tennessee is a very heavily penalized team, but that's not a convenient argument right now. That fact that's not one we want to acknowledge. Look, Heupel is a great coach for Tennessee. I think they found a guy. But only blame the refs if everything in your control, you did. I don't think you did that. I don't. And I know it might seem like I'm being hard, but I have yet to see one comment giving me any sort of context as to why that was a play call that even began to make sense. I have not seen one comment, and we've had up to 88 people in here. Not one person, not one, has challenged that. I'm not going to speak to all 79 of you who are currently in here, but if I had to guess, that's because all 79 of you also believe that wasn't the call. I don't know. You were running up and down Bama the first half, and that call was a major, major turning point. Refs don't make you give up 27 unanswered points. True. Look, guys, football is one of those games where there will always be missed calls. If we really want to get into the nitty-gritty, do you know how many holds there are? Do you know how many pass interferences there are a play? Oh, God, if we really... it was the right call. I love you, PG. I love it. If we really want to get into the nitty-gritty, we can pull up tape, and we can really start... You'll probably find a hold, at least one, on every single play. That's football. That's football. And if you talk to a lot of these DB coaches, they're teaching the DBs how to get away with pass interference. That's football. The reason I know that is because I had a DB over at my house watching the games with me this past weekend. That's part of the game. So, yeah, the refs are going to make bad calls. And I'm not even saying that they made all the right calls or that they didn't miss calls. I'll concede they missed calls because I concede in every football game ever there are missed calls. Always. Jacob hits it on the head. The refs didn't give up 27 unanswered points. The refs didn't make you take your behemoth quarterback and put him in the gun whenever he could have just fell forward and gotten a first down. That was you. So something to think about. Let's hit some comments and we're going to get out of here. Yes, to this point in the season, you're not wrong, Steven. You're not wrong. The halftime speech has got to be something. Hey, they got to be legendary. If they do make it. Hopefully, Mark. I'm really hoping. Heartbreaking loss, more like a hollow team, was exposed and will be again. Caleb never ever even won a conference title. And unfortunately, I don't believe that this is the year where it happens either. Does Reese just not have no PG? So whenever Bama hires an offensive coordinator, they run the Alabama offense. And the reason is because it doesn't make sense to be Alabama have to replace your offensive coordinator every 2 years, which on average, if we look, every 2 years, the offensive coordinator either gets an NFL opportunity, they get a head coaching opportunity, they get, Alabama is one of those places where it's not only a factory for the players, right? It's not only a developmental factory for players, it's a developmental factory for coaches. Time and time again. You look at some of these Alabama staffs, coaches will get fired and then come work as an analyst for Nick Saban and then go off just to rehab at Alabama. It's a real thing. So the reason why Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, they made an offense that you can do a lot with. It's really a fascinating offense they implemented at Alabama. But the reason why Alabama brings in Reese and is like, hey, you need to run our offense is because you have these kids for 3 years if they're unbelievable and then declare early, 4 years if they just do their thing, and maybe 5 years if they have a medical red shirt, a gray shirt, you understand. So either way you look at it, you have these kids from 3 to 5 years. If you have to replace your offensive coordinator every 2 years, that means you might have a quarterback that will have worked with 2 different offenses, and you're not really putting him in a position to really be successful because he's constantly having to learn a new offense instead of having to really hone in and mastering what's in front of him. So it became problematic. So Alabama was like, okay, well, we're just going to make our own offense, and it's going to be unbelievably flexible. To put it into perspective, you've had Steve Sarkisian call plays out of that Bama offense. You've had Lane Kiffin. You've had Brian DeBolt. You've had Mike Loxley. You've had Bill O'Brien. And now you've had Tommy Reese. So there are stylistic differences in the names I just gave you. But that's the fascinating thing about this offense is it will accommodate stylistic differences to be able to do what you want to do. It's really interesting, in my opinion. Bama quarterback and OC still trying to get in sync. And too true. O-line is still not what it has been either. True. I will say some of the offensive line issues, it's left tackle. But even then, some of it is just Milroe's got to get rid of the ball. And that's learning. He's a young quarterback. That's one of the things that, like, if I'm sitting here talking and saying, hey, a first-year quarterback has to get rid of the ball quicker, it's like saying water's wet, right? Like that's to be expected. Like it is what it is. So some of those sacks, it's interesting when we even get into that conversation because some of the sacks aren't on the offensive line. Hope to see Reese call more QB runs and motion. Give me more pre-snap motion. Ooh, Steven. My goodness, what a question. Steven, if you don't mind, we're going to talk about this one tonight on the live stream tonight because Jay might be able to make it. PG might be there. This is a topic, Steven. This is an unbelievable topic. Steven asks, Ty, whose seat is hotter, Sam Pittman or Beamer's? Man, what a question, Steve. What a question. We're going to talk about that tonight. I'm taking a picture of this. I'm writing it down because that's a discussion. We're hitting the end of the hour here, and I have to go and prep a stream for Bleacher Report. But that's a hell of a question. We're gonna open up tonight with that. Man, because I think you could answer it either way. Whew. Lebby's offense is handcuffed because of O-line play right now. I need to go back and rewatch the OU game. I had the OU game on, and it was on the quad screen. And so we had one TV with the 4 games on, another TV with the 4 games on, and then another TV with the UFC on. So, I mean, I was all over the place. And unfortunately, Volk got head kicked into the next Shadow Realm. Good for Islam. Dude is unbelievably skilled. Utah is USC's daddy. Utah is 4-0 in 3 years against USC. Bear Alexander nicknamed his Crybaby Bear because he cried. Listen, I'm not going to ever be one to talk about emotions getting high because some of these people, I mean, they're just super competitive. And people have different outlets for however. I'll put it like this, man. I knew some people in high school. You wouldn't want to mess with them. Some of the hardest dudes, even to this day. Hardest dudes, like I wouldn't cross them if my life and they take a loss like that, they'll tear up. So it is one of those things where just people deal with things differently. But you're not wrong about Utah being USC's daddy, Thunder. You and I are in 1,000% agreement there. They've skunked him. 3-0. 3-0. And what's more, Thunder, is they just got the 3rd win over USC without Cam Rising and without a few of their best players. So we'll see y'all this evening, guys. Once again, special thank you to Shady Mile. Special thank you to Home Field. We've talked about Shady Mile, one of the oldest distilleries in Kentucky, but they keep you guys, the consumer, at the forefront of everything they do, which is why they offer a great product at an affordable price. Link in the description and in the scroll wheel down below. Also, if you're into college football fan apparel, specifically vintage logos that are really high material, really like well made, Home Field has got you covered. Guys, I got the Home Field stuff in. We are going to figure out a way to do a giveaway. So Texas fans, be on the lookout. I'm going to figure out a way to do a giveaway for those Texas Home Field shirts. I want to make sure they get in the hands of some great Longhorn fans because we have some great Longhorn fans on the channel. Show tonight will be at 5:30 Central Standard Time. Going to be a great time. Recapping the weekend. A lot to talk about. Until then, we'll see you. That's it. See you. The spinning wheel of doom.